Ah, yes, Void Cascade. This little game mode over here in the Zaramon is by far the best designed game mode in Warframe. Besides all the 101 bugs, mechanically it is the perfect example of a good endgame game mode in Warframe. DE, if you're watching this, please add more game modes like Void Cascade, I beg of you. Now you may be wondering why. Well, it's extremely profitable. You can make tons of platinum from this game mode because of these guys right here, Thraxes. These Thraxes drop good arcanes which you can sell for platinum, or you can dissolve them for Vosper for the new arcane dissolution mechanic from Lloyd. Void Cascade is the best arcane farm in Warframe provided you have a mod chance booster and you're doing it in Steel Path. It's super fast paced and difficult, so it tests your skills. Plus it's a really fast scaling game mode. It usually takes about an hour 15 to an hour 20 minutes to scale to level cap, which means it's a great option to stress test your builds and push loadouts to the maximum without taking so much time from you. So saddle up you smelly tennos. This video is going to be thick with information, so follow along with me carefully. Just a disclaimer for this video so you know what to expect. This guide is for a game mode that is leaning towards endgame players. Void Cascade is a very tough game mode, it's not easy, and it does require some hefty investment. So this is not a beginner's guide by any means. This isn't a too formal setup you're going to have to invest into your builds in order to do this comfortably and scale. This game mode is best done with a mod chance booster and in Steel Path, as well as scaling it to level cap because the amount of Thraxes that spawn scales with the level. You can do it without a mod chance booster in Steel Path, but it won't be as profitable. It's still good nonetheless. So please keep this in mind when watching this video. Let's start from the beginning and walk you through everything. When you unlock the Zaramon after the New War quest, you will get access to the Tuval Commons as a node, which is Void Cascade. This game mode is either invaded by Grineer or Corpus. This rotates every 2 hours or so for the entire Zaramon. This game mode can be done in Star Chart, however I would highly recommend holding off on doing this game mode until you reach Steel Path. The reason for this is because the Thraxes have a chance of dropping these arcanes and they are affected by mod chance boosters. Steel Path already gives you a 100% mod drop chance, so it's best to run this in Steel Path, ideally with a mod chance booster. A mod chance booster is incredibly important for this farm. Yes, it is rare, but we have many more ways of getting a mod chance booster with daily sorties, circuits, and Archon hunts. The way Void Cascade works is as follows. When you load in, it will tell you to purge an Exoliser. These big ass bubbles are called Exolisers. Your job is to take over these Exolisers so you have control over it. When you walk into the bubble, it will kick you out of your Warframe and force you into your operator. You will see these little void portals that link to the Exoliser in the middle. You need to break these void portals by either shooting it with your amp, void slinging through them, or using your operator abilities to break them. You just need to hit them once. Once all the portals are broken, you will see the Exoliser will say Void Manifestation, and then you'll see the little Thrax hanging over it. Break the Exoliser by shooting it with your amp, and then the Thrax will pop out. Now Thraxes in Void Cascade are a bit tricky. They have Overguard. You have to burn through the Overguard and then their HP, and once you've killed them, they will then transform into their ghost form, which you now have to kill with your amp. Having a good amp is vital for this game mode. You will have noticed by now the game mode has started, and there is this bar below your minimap on the left. Now Exolisers will spawn every 30 seconds or so. You then just have to keep rinse and repeating the method I showed you earlier for taking over the Exolisers. However, as you start grabbing more Exolisers, Thraxes will spawn on the side while it's busy decaying to try and take over these Exolisers. If you are distracted or in another room, Thraxes will attempt to take over the Exolisers you have taken control of, and then you'll have to retake them. So your job is to take over the Exolisers, prevent them from being stolen from the Thraxes, so that they can decay. When you take control of Exolisers, the bubble will turn orange, meaning it's yours. Now whenever you kill an enemy inside that 20-meter bubble, you will see it will start charging the bar on the top right. Your goal is to make sure this bar does not go red and stays orange. The bar will decrease or increase depending on how many Exolisers have spawned and how many you have in control. For example, let's say you have one in control and one just spawned. The bar will stay still. If you grab the second one, meaning you have two in control, then there are no more and you will increase the bar, keeping it full. Let's say you have 0 in control and 1 or 2 spawn, it will start decreasing and the rate will depend on how many Exolisers have spawned and ones that you are not in control of. So Void Cascade comes down to micromanaging your existing Exolisers you have control of, keeping them safe, and getting new ones as fast as possible. When the Exolisers decay, you have completed it, and more will spawn. 4 Exolisers decayed counts as 1 round. You need 107 Exolisers decayed to reach level cap. In every Void Cascade tileset, the Exolisers will spawn in set locations in 3 rooms. So as you begin to play the mission more and more, play the different tilesets, you will start to learn all these spawn locations, allowing you to anticipate the spawn and get there faster. For the first 2 rounds, it will only be 2 rooms, and then after round 3, it will spawn in the 3rd room. That's the game mode simplified. Keep grabbing the Exolisers as fast as possible to prevent them from getting stolen. Wait for them to decay, rinse and repeat. Now before I go into amps, builds, strategies and so on, in order for you to understand the game mode and know what to build for, you need to understand the Thraxes and their mechanics. It's very important as this links into amps and weapons, etc. So let's talk about Thraxes and everything about them. There are 2 types of Thraxes. Thrax Centurions, the ones with scythes, and then the Thrax Legators, which is the ones that hold guns. Thrax Centurions are the only ones that will take over Exolisers, so these are the ones that you must worry about the most. Thraxes have Overguard. Overguard is quite a tough one to deal with, but the best way to get rid of Thrax's Overguard, especially when scaling, is armor stripping. Armor stripping in Void Cascade is #1 priority. Unless you are focusing on a pure slash and viral setup, I'd highly advise you to have armor stripping. Remember this. With armor stripping, you will be able to easily shred Thraxes. You can armor strip through Frame's abilities. If the Frame you're using does not have armor stripping, well then there's the helmet that comes in very handy. Terrify, Pillage, Arrow Strike, and Ash's Shuriken. Personally, I'm a little bit wary around Terrify and Pillage as they require a significant amount of strength, investment, or energy costs to cast. Although I do like Terrify because of the CC, so I tend to build around Terrify and its insane energy cost. I know Ash isn't the easiest frame to farm, but if your build can spare subsuming Shuriken and then adding the Augment in, it's a perfect armor strip in my opinion. Terrify is also my go-to if you have enough energy regen. If not, Arrow Strike is also a very good option in terms of energy cost plus the lower amount of strength required to full armor strip. Alternatively, the Focus School Unaru has Caustic Strike, which is the perfect option for armor stripping. For the longest time, I ran Void Cascade and thought you only had to run Madarai, but I was very wrong, which I will go over in a second. Overguard is also weak to void damage, which is why Zart's Whisper is a popular choice in Void Cascade for a helmet option. Status effects that you apply to Thraxes carry over to the Spectral form. This means you must never use Cold in Void Cascade. Cold will slow down the Thraxes significantly when they transform into the Ghost form. Like seriously, they take 2 to 3 business days to transform with max cold procs. So please, never use an Epitaph Primer or a weapon or frame that does cold. Your teammates will hate you. Because of the status effects carrying over, this means that Viral will allow your amp to do more damage to the Ghost form. This is very important to note for those of you who don't have a very good amp or are building towards a good amp and would like to get into Void Cascade without serious investment. So keep this in mind if you're trying to farm one. Just make sure to apply the viral procs before you kill them, as you cannot apply status effects once they are in the Ghost form. It's important to note that hitting headshots on Thrax's Ghost form will give you more damage, as the Ghost form follow the usual headshot mechanic in this game. To make this easier, when you kill a Thrax, they will spin when turning around into the Ghost form, but they will always end up the way they were facing before they were killed. This way you can memorize where they were facing and stand the right way and wait for them to transform and time it and instantly get a headshot. When you kill the Thrax and they transform into the Ghost form, they will then just kind of linger around, or they will proceed to bolt in a particular direction, which you will then have to chase after them. But this is the important part. After a little while, or sometimes really short or sometimes really long, it's very random. After they have transformed into the Ghost, they will attempt to go back to their original form, and they do this by locking onto an enemy, and they will proceed to suck that enemy, and then they will go back into their original form. So this means that you cannot just kill the Thrax and leave the Ghost form running around. It will return back to its normal form and proceed to steal the Exoliser again. But when they are stuck in that animation where they are sapping the enemy's life away, your amp damage to them goes up significantly. So if you're not running, let's say, Madurai, or you're not running a good amp, this is a good time to kill them in that window. Although, be careful with this, as this depends on how fast the Thrax will lock onto the target and switch back. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's very slow, so you don't want to waste time and just, run after one Thrax. So my suggestion is deal with nearby enemies while you keep an eye on the Thrax, and then as it starts to transform, run back, kill it, and move on. You can usually hear a specific sound they make when they are transforming. You get two types of Thraxes, ones with guns and ones with scythes, which I mentioned earlier. The ones with scythes have two abilities. The Hispar Lunge, which by the way is incredibly deadly. This has on many occasions killed me even while having a shield. I don't know if this is a glitch or if it's intended, but it has happened to me many times before. And then the Scythe Thrax will also become immune to damage, lift themselves up, dash a few times towards you, and then do a whirlwind attack which really hurts. The other Thrax with the gun will split into multiple ghost forms, shooting out beams that also do insane amounts of damage to you and also apply magnetic. Thraxes also apply magnetic when they normal attack you, so keep this in mind when building your frame. If your setup can spare an arcane nullifier so you don't lose energy, it's a very good quality of life option. Using the ability Silence actually nullifies the Thraxes and stops them from using their abilities, making it a lot easier to kill them as they can only normal melee attack you. A community member of mine, Hassan, mentioned this to me, and honestly it's one of my favorite Helmand slots to use in Void Cascade. Another very important thing for Thraxes is if you are running Last Gasp, you can shoot the ghost form of the Thraxes to instantly come back to life. This is something to look out for in case you have been down. With all of this in mind, regarding Thraxes and their mechanics, this leads us onto one of the most important parts of Void Cascade, amps. Amps are incredibly vital in this game mode. If you can't kill the Thrax, well, you'll simply fail. So let's talk about these bad boys. Here is the unfortunate part of Void Cascade. If you are wanting to do this efficiently and effectively, you're going to need to grind Fortuna and Little Duck standing. I know, it's pain. I'm sorry. But this is the time to get that random 3 AM motivation you've been searching for these past few months. It's okay. The two best amps you can use are the 177 and the 777. If you are running a budget, I'd recommend running the 123 until you either get the 177 or the 777. This does not mean you can't run any other combination. This is my personal recommendation. This is what has worked for me. To be honest, I haven't tested out other combos much, so there may be other combos out there that I don't know and are better. The 123 worked up until 2k comfortably with only one arcane. As long as you apply viral before killing the Thraxes, you'll be able to do enough damage in the ghost form with your amp. So when it comes to amps, grind Onko and Little Duck and get the parts that I mentioned. This leads me onto your loadouts for your operator and amps. In order for you to get a second slot for your amp arcanes, you need to be rank 5 in Zaramon. I know, it's a lot. You can buy an amp arcane adapter from Cavalero. So again, more grinding. But it's very important for Void Cascade. This does not mean to say that you need to have it, it just helps a lot. If you're planning on not doing level cap runs and just want to do smaller endurance runs, then you can get away with just one arcane. The two best amp arcanes to use are, guess what, farmed from Void Cascade. I know, ironic. Eternal Onslaught and Eternal Eradicate. Eternal Eradicate first, in my opinion. When you get the amp arcane adapter, use Eternal Onslaught. Now here is the thing. You can go two ways with this. 1. Save up the plat and buy a rank 5 from someone. 2. You wait, farm up Void Cascade, or you rank up Zaramon and buy the arcanes from Cavalero. Your choice here. This is if you're wanting to reach level cap or just do endurance runs. If you want to run on a budget, a rank 3 or so will be fine. But I would highly recommend focusing on getting these two arcanes max rank and equipped with your amp. It will make a huge difference. For the operator arcanes, Magus Lockdown is super helpful for CCing nearby enemies while you are dealing with a Thrax. Unfortunately, it no longer tethers the ghost form, they changed it. RIP DE, please bring it back. The other one is either Magus Repair or Magus Elevate, whichever one tickles your fancy. You get Magus Lockdown and Repair from Little Duck and Elevate from Onko. That's amps and arcanes sorted. Now this leads me on to focus schools. There are two main ones that we can run, Madurai and Unaru. For the longest time I thought you only needed to run Madurai, but no, it's not true. Madurai is extremely good, but Unaru is perfect if you need to armor strip enemies and don't want to have armor stripping on your frames. Unaru gives you the flexibility to focus on maybe some more damage subsumes on your frames like Zata or Raw, or any other subsume or frame you want to use. For Madurai, focus on getting Contamination Wave and Void Strike. These two abilities will help you kill the ghost forms faster, and Contamination Wave is a very good option to clear the portals when taking over Exolisers. Void Strike is particularly good when you find yourself surrounded by multiple Thraxes that you've managed to kill, and now you're stuck with 5+ ghosts just chilling around you. You can quickly cast Void Strike, and then you can either normal or alternate fire your amp depending on your combination. Of course, your waybounds are important too if you have farmed up enough focus. For Unaru, you want to focus on Caustic Strike. Unaru Wisp will allow us to kill the Thraxes more comfortably, and then Magnetic Flare if you are running against Corpus Enemies. If you're a later game player and you've grinded a lot of focus trees, getting Last Gasp works very well for your waybounds. The rule of thumb is, if you have armor stripping on your frame, run Madurai. If you don't have armor stripping on your frame and you need armor stripping, run Unaru. That pretty much concludes Thraxes, Amps, Arcanes, and Focus Schools. I know, it's a lot of prep, but guess what? There is way more. We're going to go over all my weapons, frames, loadout suggestions, and so on, and then we will talk about strategies as well as some tips and tricks. Void Cascade is a selfish game mode. If you're playing in a group, it's important that you can fend for yourself, otherwise you going down or dying can actually mess up the game or get you close to messing up. Because as you start to scale the game mode, more Thraxes will spawn. It's very important every player can kill a Thrax comfortably. This is in a team setting that is min-maxing. If you're a casual, then it's fine. Of course, you can mess up a few times. It's not the end of the world if you don't land up going to level cap. The point is, using frames that are tanky or have many forms of damage mitigation is crucial when playing Void Cascade. The number one defense is invisibility. Invisibility is by far the best defense in Void Cascade. Sure, you can die every now and then and get caught in the crossfire, but shield gating will fix that for you no problem. The 3 frames I like to use that have invisibility is Ashe, Octavia, and Loki. Ashe is very comfortable with his invisibility. He has his first ability with the augment, Seeking Shuriken, to armor strip, and you can subsume Zarta's Whisper on him. And because of this, well, every single loadout will work. His kit is perfect for Void Cascade. This is the build that I usually run for him. Remember, just so you know, for all the builds that I show in this video, you don't have to follow exactly. Change the build to what you have available and to the playstyle that you like. I also run a raw build if you want to focus on more slash damage, which pairs well with his passive. For Octavia, I only really run one setup. This is the build that I ran for the solo Void Cascade level cap run I did. Octavia works really well as she has invisibility, and you can place down your mallet in the middle of the Exolisers and allow enemies to focus on mallet, walking towards it, killing themselves in the bubble, which allows you to passively keep up your bar. It's really nice as you can be halfway across the map and still gain the bar. You don't need Shuriken, this is just a nice option. If you want, you can run something else like Thara Strike. Now Loki. Loki was the first frame I ever did a solo deathless level cap run for Void Cascade. He is by far the most comfortable frame I have ever played at level cap. I love the setup for endurance runs. Subsume silence over his 1. Use Safeguard Switch will allow you to be invulnerable every time you switch with an enemy. Then use Irradiating Disarm to confuse enemies. You want to stack a lot of duration so that you can stay invisible longer, and stack all the duration of Loki's other abilities. With this setup, you are silencing Thraxes so they can't use their abilities and Eximus units, staying invisible for over 30 seconds, staying invulnerable because you have 8 seconds to recast Switch Teleport, and you have Irradiating Disarm, removing all ranged weapons, making enemies melee each other and completely ignore you. You basically don't get hit with the setup. If you are feeling confident or you're in a team, you can realistically play most frames and just resort to shield gating to keep you alive. Some suggestions that I like to play are Citrine, no helmet setup, but we run 2 green shards to stack up our corrosive stacks to 14, which equals full armor strip. This is my favorite Citrine setup. She does start to struggle a little bit as you start scaling, but she can go to level cap as long as you are quick to shield gate. Of course, Revenant Prime is the go-to if you want to level cap comfortably. One of my favorite frames to play is Mag. I run this setup often. I really enjoy Mag because of the massive AoE armor strip and just the sheer amount of CC and damage this frame can do. Counterpulse is an amazing CC augment for Cascade, and then we subsume Nourish over your 1 to sustain your energy more. Gauss is also really fun, although he starts to struggle a bit when you go over 3k. I really want to say Kulova, he's an amazing frame, but his overguard also starts to fall off as you scale, but if you're not going for level cap and just doing endurance runs for a bit, then Cullover and Gauss is really fun to play. There are many other frames, of course. I'm just letting you know a few frames and setups I have run in the past. I tend to go for a more offensive and selfish playstyle in Void Cascade, as I find it helps to scale it a lot faster. Before I go into the weapon suggestions and builds, I want to get everything regarding frames out of the way. So when it comes to Arcanes, generally Arcane Energize is very nice for energy sustain, but something like Nourish and Equilibrium will work really well. Arcane Nullifier is very good if you are struggling to sustain your energy because the Thraxes keep applying magnetic on you. Depending on your build, if you can, run Arcane Agility. It is insanely good. The parkour velocity, we will go over why parkour velocity is so good in a second. A really powerful CC Arcane is Arcane Eruption. If you feel like you're dying a lot, Arcane Eruption is a great crowd control Arcane. Now let's go over Archon Shards. Archon Shards are dependent on the frame. However, the two best stats, especially for Void Cascade, is casting speed and parkour velocity. Parkour velocity is absolutely vital. It took me so long to realize this, and this is because Void Cascade makes you run back and forth for hundreds of meters. And there are times where you may be word focusing and you have to race back 400 plus meters because you have 3 or 4 Exolisers that are not in your control and you don't have much time until the bar runs out. Parkour velocity has saved me so much in recent runs. Parkour velocity shards are really something to consider. Just like I mentioned earlier, Arcane Agility is also really good for that extra 60% parkour velocity. Then, if you're not focusing on melee, the Praetos with the right evolutions is also a really nice stat stick for movement. One of the biggest problems in Void Cascade is how often you get knocked down. This is a huge issue, and I know everyone does not have Prime sure-footed, so you have 3 options. 1, run frames that have knockdown immunity, like Gauss, Rev, and so on. Or use Inaru with Poise, which is a very good option because you don't have to sacrifice mods. 3, sacrifice mods running sure-footed and either Constitution or Power Drift. It depends on what your build is and if you can afford sacrificing 2 mods. This is something to keep in mind when preparing. It's also worth noting that Nourish is a very good subsume for energy sustain, which I mentioned earlier, and Gloom is an excellent choice as it no longer slows down the Thraxes in the ghost form, but beware, it will only slow the Thraxes after the Overguard breaks. Okay, that's a lot, I know, but all these little things will help you in your runs when building your frame of choice. Now, let's finally move on to weapons. There are a lot, so stay with me. For primaries, nothing beats the good old Felox and Fenmore. The Felox is my most used level cap weapon. For obvious reasons, here is the build and evolutions here. The Fenmore build is as follows. Then we move on to the new Incarnate weapons, the first one being the Torrid. Although it does slightly fall off with very high levels, but still a good endurance weapon. Burst on Incarnate is one of my favorites. I love using this weapon, it's too satisfying to use. The Latron Incarnate is another option. You can also run Galvanized Scope if you want more red crits. One of my new favorite weapons, the Mitre Incarnate, is also very deadly against Thraxes. The Strun Incarnate is particularly good for Grineer enemies, and with the insane status chance, then it gets very strong when dealing against Corpus when you go flat Toxin. The Convectrix with Ash fighting against Grineer is honestly deadly if you're running the raw build. The Phage is also very good when built right and if you can maintain your stacks. It will delete Thraxes even at level cap. The only thing is being able to keep your stacks up against high level enemies. Phantasma Prime is also really good for endurance runs, but you need ammo sustain mods and armor stripping. The Cedo is not a bad budget option, but you need to have your stacks up to do good damage. It can also be used as a primary primer if you're running a secondary that is using Gun CO. The Nataruk is also a good budget option, especially when running it with Mag and her bubbles. That's quite a few primary weapons, I know, but there are more. These are just ones that I have run previously. A very important note when it comes to Void Cascade is make sure you're running primary dexterity because there are times where you won't be killing normal enemies every second. So running something like Merciless won't work because you keep losing your stacks. Dexterity allows you to have more time while you are moving in between points, allowing you to keep stacks longer. Alright, let's move on to secondaries. Now 99% of the time I just run a primer and run Galvanized Aptitude on my primary. Please do not use Epitaph as a primer in Void Cascade. It applies cold and it will slow down the Thraxes by a lot. The primer I use is the Kuva Nucor with a magnetic progenitor. If you're wanting to run damage weapons, the Latum is still one of the best weapons to use for Void Cascade. The Prisma Angstrom Incarnon shreds everything, it's really satisfying. The Lex Incarnon also shreds, the only downside is the low amount of ammo in the Incarnon form. And arguably one of the strongest weapons in Warframe at the moment, the Dual Toxicist. That's secondaries out of the way, but personally, secondaries are primers for me. Now melees. Personally, glaives are king for Void Cascade. When pairing your primary or secondary with Dexterity Arcanes, getting those melee kills is super easy with glaives. So, glaive prime for Grineer and Serrata for Corpus. At the release of this video, glaives are bugged at the moment when paired with a secondary, which really sucks. Hopefully DE will fix this soon, but until they do, you can consider using something else that you enjoy or running the dual Icors. The Praetos I mentioned earlier, the Inodym is also a very good option, and the legendary dual Icors which I just mentioned are insanely strong at the moment. Right now my favorite melee with melee influence, but I have a strong feeling this will get nerfed, so change up the build if it does get nerfed to the ground. Otherwise the actual weapon and build will work fine, it's just melee influence that makes it utterly broken. These are just a few melee suggestions, otherwise use whatever melee you like and think will do well against enemies. Now that concludes weapons. I now want to go over companion options. There are a couple of companions you can now run, especially after the companion rework. The Worm Prime has become my new favorite to help with status cleanse. The Nautilus works very well with pulling enemies in, Death Cube Prime for energy generator, a Smeeter if you want more loot, and the OG best companion, the Panzer for viral spreading. These are all the companions that I usually run. I mainly go for Worm these days, but choose whichever one works for you. For all the Sentinels that I run the Hellstrom with Synth Deconstruct and Gas. This helps a lot with Equilibrium, allowing you to get way more health orb drops, allowing Equilibrium to proc way more often. Okay, so I have dumped a lot of builds on you. This is so you can choose whatever works for you depending on what you have available and how far you are in the game. But I want to show you loadouts that I generally run just so that you can get an idea. The first Ashe loadout I run is this one here with the Fenwall. Bear in mind the weapons are completely flexible. My Citrine loadout, the Rev loadout I have run except we can't run glaives anymore so I'm using the dual Icors, my Loki setup, my Octavia setup, and my Gauss loadout. As you can see I use a primer, there is a spider right next to me. As you can see I use a primer in all of my setups. Again, this is all flexible. Now that is all the builds and setups out of the way. Let's finally go into strategies as well as some tips and tricks. When it comes to playing in teams, there is a particular strategy which is well known for Void Cascade, and that is the 2x2 strategy. 2 people on the offense taking over Exolisers as fast as possible, while 2 people sit back and defend the Exolisers. Gaz has made a video on Void Cascade recently, so go and check his video out. There are quite a few similarities and strategies that we share. I will put a link in the description below. This strategy is really good if you have a pre-made team or if you are in a public lobby and each of you agree on a role. The offensive players will grab the Exolisers as fast as possible. The defending 2 will take control of the room. When the next room of Exolisers starts spawning, the offensive players will rush to the next room while the defensive players stay back. If everyone holds up and doesn't fall short on their roles, then you will scale Void Cascade very, very fast and easily. This is a very important strategy if you are in a team. If everyone is rushing new Exolisers, it messes up everything because the previous rooms will get taken over and will catch up to you. They won't decay in time, meaning the mission will be a lot slower. Offensive players will play something with Invis or are super tanky, and then they will be the ones that are focusing on speed. So it's a good idea if you want to be offensive to run parkour velocity, but it doesn't hurt for everyone to have parkour velocity in case you mess up and need to run back a few hundred meters quickly. It's important that every teammate can kill Thraxes easily, because what happens is, as the game mode starts to scale, Thraxes start stacking up, and before you know it, there are literally 10 Thraxes in one room, and trust me, it's very stressful trying to tackle that many Thraxes at once. So to keep it manageable, the second you see a Thrax, kill it. Otherwise, with playing in a team, you can get creative with your own team comps and certain frames. From past experience, team comps that I found work really well together are 2 Ashes and 2 Octavias. Another one I have played is Revenant Ashe, Octavia, and Mag. The buffs you get from Rev's Mesmer Charges, Octavia, and Mag CCing everything is just amazing. If I had to think of team comps just off the top of my head, Ashe, Loki, Revenant, and something like Citrine would be absolutely amazing. Citrine is an amazing support provided she gets a little help for surviving later on, as 90% damage reduction doesn't take you far when an enemy does a few 100,000 damage to you in one hit. Now, if you are a solo player, well, my good tenor, you're venturing into dangerous territory here. Solo Void Cascade endurance runs are different gravy of difficult, as you're trying to do everyone's job yourself. I have done many attempts, failed with quite a few frames, and only have completed a couple of solo runs. Octavia and Loki were my 2 solo runs that I completed. However, you don't need to go to level cap. You can go however far you can handle and just leave. So use whatever setup you want and adjust to your playstyle. Just a little tip, try and focus on getting the Exolisers as fast as possible when they spawn. Parkour velocity is your best friend here, please, especially as a solo player. You'll be needing to move between rooms really fast to deal with all the Thraxes. So that's the strategies out of the way. Let's go over the factions. Like I mentioned earlier on in this video, Zaramon is invaded by either Grineer or Corpus Enemies. For Grineer enemies, there is one in particular which you will need to watch out for, the Kuva Trocarian. These guys are pain. The Troc dudes throw a spear in the ground and the bubble will expand to a certain size. If you run into this bubble, it will kick you out of your frame and into your operator. The way to deal with this is as follows. Either use your operator abilities to break it, Void Sling into the spear, which is my favorite method because sometimes it kind of glitches and hides in the little nooks and crannies so you can't reach it. Void Sling will usually fix this issue for you. Honestly, when you see this bubble, side quest that bitch and focus on it. Like, get rid of it as fast as possible. That's pretty much the only Grineer enemies to look out for besides the annoying Eximus units, which you should be no stranger to by now. Generally, my setups and builds focus on the usual viral slash or corrosive heat against Grineer targets. Then, for Corpus, well, we all know which enemy. Nullifiers. They are a big problem in Void Cascade. A Corpus level cap is significantly harder than a Grineer level cap in Void Cascade. Most people actually just wait for Grineer, and I'll be honest, it is easier than Corpus. When it comes to nullifiers, honestly the only setup I really run if I go into a Corpus run is the Mitre Incarnon. With the Mitre Augment neutralizing Justice, it's just perfect for this. For Corpus in general, I only really run the Mitre now, and the Serrata or the Dual Equals, and then a Primer, of course, for Thraxes. Personally, that's the best loadout you can run against Corpus enemies because nullifiers are pain, and in general, fighting against shield is a lot more difficult unless you're running flat Toxin. So of course, for Corpus enemies, you want to build for Toxin. That concludes factions and what to watch out for. Let's go over some general tips and tricks. I've already covered so much in this guide, there isn't much that I haven't already said. The main thing is to stay ahead of the Exolisers, make sure that you can kill the Thraxes with ease. I know Void Cascade is a lot of prep, it's not a game mode that you can go in with barely anything. It does not mean to say that you can't run a budget or can't run budget setups. You absolutely can, but you will need to do some grinding so that you can work towards a simple setup or loadout that will allow you to scale for endurance runs. If you are downed and enter last gasp, remember to kill the Thrax ghost forms if there's one floating around for an instant revive. Don't use cold. Parkour velocity is literally the best thing. It will change how your run plays drastically. Invisibility is the best defense. This game mode is really buggy. It's a lot better than before. There are still a few bugs that creep through. For the most part, the best way to fix them is to full die and then revive. Have no one revive you and just full die. The elevator bug is really annoying and has not been fixed. When you try to extract while waiting for your teammates, enemies and Thraxes can still damage you, effectively killing you in the elevator, but the elevator stops you from shooting or casting abilities. The best fix for this is to just sit outside the elevator, allowing you to cast abilities and deal damage to enemies and wait for your teammates. Once they're all nearby the elevator, you can then all run in and extract as soon as everyone is there. There is one tile set which has a massive room, which is very nice because you get about 5 Exoliser spawns in one room. It's more stressful but allows you to scale faster. A very important tip: if you ever find yourself in a pinch where the bar is really close to being depleted and you don't have much time, it's best to just grab the Exolisers as fast as possible, take control of them, ignore the Thraxes, and your goal is to get the Exolisers under your control first so the bar will slow down or slowly replenish, and then you can go back and deal with the units or Thraxes and so on. Sometimes if, for example, you only have one Exolizer under your control, and there's literally 4 and the bar is depleting super fast. Grab the first one. If there's a whole bunch of enemies inside the bubble, kill all those enemies so that it starts increasing the bar, and then it gives you a little bit more time to get all the other Exolizers. But in all honesty, that is pretty much everything with Void Cascade. As you practice this game mode, you will get super comfortable and more efficient with it. This has been a lot, I know. I'm glad you made it till the end. If you did make it to the end, if you could leave a like on this video, it took me really long to make and it goes a long way for me. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing, and a huge thank you to all of our channel members for supporting me. Thank you so much. You forever have my gratitude. I will see you all in the next one.